Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. President Trump will be in China from 13th to the 15th May. He will be meeting President Xi Jinping, and the meeting would be very comprehensive. That's why there are a lot of speculations, and the people are talking about what would be the agenda of this meeting: economic, security, conflict, climate change, green development, or whatever. But the fundamental questions are: Do does President Trump have something to offer to China to de-escalate the tension between both countries? Or the, President Trump have enough power, or the USA has enough power to threaten China to come for a deal, the favorable deal for the USA? And the second question is, will both leaders will understand the cooperation is a must? A win-win cooperation is required at this point of the time, which will not only be the beneficial for the both country but also for the world. In this context, and these speculations and the news and the discussions, we have invited Dr. Dennis Small. He is a very famous person in the US and Latin America. He did a lot of work on economic and economic review. He is a director of Afro-American Center Scheller Institute in the USA and in the Latin America. He also write on the subject for many years. He deliberate on also to build the bridges, not to go for the conflicts or to build the walls. Thank you, Mr. Dennis, for joining us for today's session. So, let's start with
Mhm.
the fundamental questions, a very common question. What do you think? What would be the agenda of President Trump while he is traveling to China?
Well, I've learned over the years that it's not a good idea to speculate on what might be going on inside Trump's head because it changes from moment to moment, and he himself often doesn't know what he is planning to do. What I can say with some certainty is that the result of this meeting between President Xi Jinping and President Trump will depend in large degree on what Trump does, because it's quite clear that China comes into this meeting, this heads of state meeting, with a very open mind, with a very open hand, with a very open approach, searching for ways of finding a win-win situation with a very difficult partner in a very difficult situation. But China has done that in similar situations in the past and is, in my view, I'm not a China expert, but from my view from the United States, it appears that that will be the approach China will take again, as they have in the past with President Trump. If President Trump chooses to take advantage of that openness on the Chinese side or not will depend on a number of factors, including many factors that are outside the US-China relationship. In particular, what is going on between the United States and Russia,
Mhm.
which a little window of opportunity has been opened up in this recent period by the fact that Trump did back Putin with a ceasefire for the May 9th parade. And Trump pressured Zelensky very hard and forced Zelensky to stop with his threats of attacking the Red Square with drones, because Russia had warned that they would counterstrike against the downtown area of Kiev if that happened. And anyone who follows Russia knows that this is not an idle threat. So I think Trump did act positively there. And I think that Trump is also under pressure at home here in the United States because of the economic consequences of the war which he himself started, the unprovoked war of the United States and Israel against Iran, which was not settled quickly as he hoped it would be. Iran is not capitulating to pressure as he has hoped and still hopes they will do.
But I just want to ask a supplementary question here. Whenever
Mhm.
you listen to Mr. Trump, President Trump, he always claim economy is improving. He started to just give the numbers, and but if there is any bad thing, he started to blame the Fed. the governor of the Fed, said that he is not cooperating. So then how you can say the situation in the economic situation is not good?
Well, you have to remember that President Trump is a New York real estate agent. He
Mhm,
would sell you an apartment, a slum apartment in New York City with rats and cockroaches and no heating and convince you that it's paradise. And
mhm,
that's more or less the same approach that he takes to the question of the economy. He
mhm,
throws out figures right and left. It's all not true. What we have is, on the global scale, a global financial bubble of $2.4 quadrillion. That's a two with 15 zeros. It's unpayable. These are derivatives and financial bets. It's
mhm.
centered in banks of Wall Street and the City of London. And what has happened, especially by the Iran war, is a major break in what most people called the supply chain. But really, it's a bad phrase. What really is the case is you have a global physical economy where one part depends directly on another part for its own functioning. You stop 20% of the world's oil flow through the Strait of Hormuz. You stop a third of the world's fertilizer flow. And this is going to have massive repercussions all the way around the world. I'll
And the
give you one.
gas, 25% gas.
And gas, yeah. And I mean, I'll give you two examples. One directly in the United States, which is the question that you're asking. Everyone in the United States is yelling and screaming about gasoline at the gas station costing $5 per gallon. That's very high. It's
And what
double.
was the price before the war?
$3, $3.20, depending. So
Mhm.
it's gone up 30, 40%, and it's continuing to rise. Um, but much more important than that is the price of diesel fuel, because diesel fuel has risen by about 60% in the course of the war. And that is the lifeblood of the agricultural sector. You can't have farming without diesel. You have diesel for tractors. You have diesel to get the food to the marketplace. You have diesel for everything. We were just speaking uh, with a seminar we just had with a leader of a group called Farm Action. And it's a woman who said, people have no idea what's going to happen. American agriculture is going to completely collapse with diesel prices where they
I
are.
was just reading somewhere during the last 5 years, there was a rise, 60% rise in the bankruptcy among the farmers in the
Yes.
USA.
Yeah. And the bankruptcies are going on and on. Over 50, 60 farmers go out of business every single day in the United States, and it's being taken over by large multinational grain corporations.
Mhm.
Cargill and those kinds of things. So the family farmer, which has been the backbone of American farming, is disappearing. That's one example. I'll give you another example, two other examples quickly. Africa, the nations of Eastern Africa depend for their agriculture, 75% of their fertilizer comes from the through the Strait of Hormuz. That's 70%, 5% of the fertilizer they're no longer getting. They themselves estimate that if you reduce fertilizer application by 10%, you are going to reduce food production by 25%. That's because they have poor farmland. Fertilizer is everything. The case of Central America, countries in Central America depend almost 100% on imported pharmaceuticals from India, which
Mhm.
produces a lot of generics in pharmaceuticals. These are countries that now have no antibiotics, no insulin, no anti-parasitic medicine because India is short on the inputs it needs to produce pharmaceuticals because of the Strait of Hormuz.
Mhm.
So all of this, I think, will be shaping the environment in which Trump and Xi Jinping will be meeting because Trump is looking over
But
his shoulder.
there is a thing. So you beautifully portrayed the whole situation. So that's mean economic agenda will be the top priority for the President Trump.
I think it will be the de facto primary issue, whether it's listed as number one on the agenda. China may list Taiwan as number one on the agenda,
Mhm.
understandably. But the background to everything, what is shaping the entire thing, in my view, is the economic question. And this gives grounds for a little hope because even though the United States keeps applying sanctions and tariffs, and the Supreme Court of the United States keeps declaring that those tariffs are illegal and have to be repaid, and the United States, and especially the group around Trump who represent Wall Street, people like Besant, people like Lutnick, people like Miran, these are the people who want to go to war with China. But there are others who understand that there is a crucial importance that these two world superpowers in economics meet eye to eye and agree. And I think that will be a possibility off this meeting, even though the approach that China takes comes from a totally different standpoint than the approach that Trump takes.
But
Trump's
here, as you mentioned already, so US is going for the sanctions. The US is going for the trade wars. It is not the first time that during his first presidency, the President Trump imposed the trade sanctions on China. In the second, again in the second term also. In this context, how President Trump can ask, or you can say ask for a deal on the economic or having a win-win deal.
Well, we'll have to see what happens on the sanctions and so on. They have been applied, and the Wall Street absolutely wants war, and so does the City of London, war with China to contain and to destroy China. That is their stated intention. And it's both economic as well as the reactivation of revanchism and right-wing nationalism in Japan, for example, with the
Mhm.
Takaichi government, very reminiscent of what is also going on in Germany, targeted against Russia. So the idea that these two countries from World War II are being groomed once again for a major military buildup, one to target Russia, the other to target China, should make us think about the strategic context. But on the economy, I think Trump, because he has trouble at home as well, will be looking for an angle or a niche where perhaps something can be done on economics. Just as with Russia, Putin presented at Anchorage opportunities for economic development, which Trump really liked, like building cooperation, maybe even a Bering Strait tunnel. I think the possibilities of a cooperation between China and the United States are enormous. We can win so much by cooperation, and I'm sure that China will put this on the table. I'm hoping that Trump will both feel enough pressure behind him from people who are unhappy about what's going on now, and also have enough sense to know that even from a transactional standpoint, which is his standpoint, it makes sense to go ahead with such a deal.
But the question is, when you're talking about the economic situation of the USA, and also being you can say the reader of economy, global economy, I also read the stuff about USA economy. I see economic production base is a weak. If you look at the interest rate, that is quite high. Inflation is resurging. In this context, what President Trump can offer economically to China to have a deal?
Well, I think a lot of things could be offered if he were really intelligent. I mean, strategically intelligent. I don't mean that he's smart. He may be smart, but you can be very smart with your IQ, but strategically stupid. There are many areas of cooperation with China that would benefit the United States. The whole question of the Belt and
Not
Road.
benefit the United States. We can come later on that. But what he can offer to China, where China can benefit from the American market and China get ready for the deal.
Oh, there are many different things. I mean, there's the whole question of working on superconductors. There's areas in terms of uh, AI that could be benefited. If there would stop being a war on chips, this would be beneficial for both countries. Heavy investment in capital goods. The United States doesn't know how to build a railroad anymore. We initiated it. We did build the first transcontinental railroad under Abraham Lincoln. That is in our history. We know that's a good thing to do, but we Americans don't know how to build a railroad, let alone a high-speed railroad. I'm sure you're aware, Shakil, because you study these things, that against China's, what is it now, 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail line, more or
No, it's
less?
almost more than 50,000. No, they have crossed their limit.
I'm behind the times, more than 50,000.
And
How
then one
many?
more thing I add here. I was just reading yesterday a news. So China is considering that the 170 kilometer per hour rails, they are outdated and they are only 10
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah.
And
And
look
they're
at their
prepared
speed.
to update and keep doing it because they view an investment as something you have to overcome with more development. But the United States, you probably know this, but your listeners and viewers may not know this. The number of kilometers of high-speed rail that we have in the United States is exactly zero. We don't have high speed.
And that would be shock for the many people because who think the USA is a leader in everything.
Yeah. We have bridges that are collapsing. We have ports that cannot handle super ports, deep ports. They're certainly not containerized or mechanized the way Chinese are. We could benefit cooperation. And I think really perhaps the most interesting of all is if there were cooperation at the frontiers of science and technology,
Hmm.
because China has clearly leapfrogged ahead and is working in areas that are vital for all of humanity. For example, fusion energy. This is an area which the United States has been discussing for 50 years, and we're nowhere. We've made some advances, but not much. China is moving ahead. The possibilities of cooperation on that are enormous for both countries. Space, working in space. It is so suicidal for the United States to say we will not allow Chinese cosmonauts or taikonauts to set foot on the International Space Station. It's ridiculous. Our space station is now about to end its entire life expectancy, and China is now building its own. These are areas that are of interest for all of humanity. We would do very well if we were to cooperate because it is possible. The actual reality is that the way an economy works is win-win. People can have a different theory of economics. They may believe in Keynesianism or Milton Friedman or liberalism. They're wrong. Scientifically, they're wrong. The way a physical economy works is the way Lyndon LaRouche, the American economist, demonstrated, which incidentally is exactly the basis on which the United States was created by Alexander Hamilton, the first head of the central bank of the United States, the National Bank. And therefore, on this 250th anniversary of the independence of the United States, these ideas are coming to the surface again. But the idea was win-win, that a physical economy benefits by advances in technology and growth. And if my partner advances, that benefits me. The transactional approach of Donald Trump is really anti-American. I mean, the idea is if you give me something, I'll give you something.
But he
I
says America first. He always say
well,
America
but
first.
but if it's America first and only America first, it's going to be America last, whether we
Hmm.
like it or not. We can throw slogans around all around the world, but a slogan does not build a high-speed rail line.
Hmm.
A
Hmm.
slogan does not build fusion power.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
therefore, the areas of potential cooperation are enormous between our two countries. And I just hope that Trump will pick up on some of the possibilities that China will surely put on the plate.
Yeah, and definitely you are right here because I was just reading a report about China, USA economy, and it was showing that after the Chip and the Science Act, there was a resurgence of the production capacity, but it could not create the required job because they don't either they don't have the skilled labor or they are going too much for the technology. Therefore, they're and third thing is the competitiveness. Now coming to the another question. As we know, the President Trump and also know his close circle. So from the Wall Street and the city, London, city of London. So who are everybody? If you look at them, most of them they are the China hawk. So they want a war, as you said. Do you think President Trump will threat China on some issues if you don't comply with us or don't cooperate with us? We can do this. We can do this.
Yes, and I would add to that group that you mentioned, the direct Wall Street and City of London crowd, there is a whole grouping of neoconservatives as well, the
Hmm.
neocons, so-called, or Bush
Like
Republicans,
Secretary Mike Rubio. Micro.
like like Secretary Marco Rubio. I was going to mention that exactly, Secretary of State. And they have a similar approach to the Wall Street crowd, like Besant at Treasury. Besant is the one who said proudly, "We have strangled Iran. Our economic warfare is more effective than a military campaign." So they view economics that way. But China is not a little economy. China does not is not vulnerable the same way Cuba or Venezuela or even Iran is vulnerable to strangulation. So I think that there will be threats, if not explicit, and maybe not coming from President Trump himself. It will come from others, and that also will come in the form of building up other uh, area countries to play that card. I think the Japanese question is very serious, and the revanchism, which has been revived in Japan, is really a problem. Philippines as well, and the whole discussion around the South China Sea and placing, as people in the Pentagon want to do, forward-based military capabilities to be able to surround China on the first island chain. And that's the explicitly stated policy of the National Security Strategy document, which, although it mainly talks about Latin America and it talks about China just a little bit, it does say we are drawing the line on the first island chain. So this is a policy that applies to the entire world if that grouping gets its way. But Shakil, what your listeners need to know is that Trump is losing his own base. See, there is a fragmentation going on in American society of the parties and including the MAGA base who are disillusioned with Trump because he entered government saying no more wars, number one, and number two, stop inflation and get the economy going. He hasn't stopped the wars. The inflation is growing very rapidly and getting worse. And the actual employment figures for the United States are terrible. Parenthetically, I would recommend don't just look at the monthly figures. They give you first a monthly number. When they give you the next monthly number, they say, oh, by the way, we revised the numbers from the month before. We revised them down.
Statistics,
So
statistics.
statistics, you can lie with statistics. So if you look at the whole year with the actual revised numbers, there is no growth. There is absolutely no growth, 10,000 growth in manufacturing. It's ridiculous. And so you can give a speech on the fabricated numbers, and then you don't talk about the revision.
Okay, I
So,
just want
but
to
this
ask a
base,
simply. Mm,
but this MAGA
yes.
base is fracturing. You have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, you have Massey, you have others. And the kind of fracturing that's going on here is similar, not as far gone yet, as what we just saw in Great Britain with the elections, where the two major parties, the Conservatives and Labour, were just wiped out. They were just
Mhm.
completely wiped out. And we see it also in Germany with the growth of the AfD, which nobody is allowed to talk to of the major parties, but they're not the major parties anymore. It's the AfD. The same in Spain and so on. So we see a global process here where Trump has now got to look over
But
both
these are not
shoulders.
very, but these are not very encouraging examples because the fundamentalist, if the fundamentalist is taking over everywhere, whatever the case, so that can also create the most serious challenges.
Well, there's opportunities, as the Chinese say. There, what the word for danger and the word for opportunity or chance is the same word, or so I'm told. I don't speak any Chinese, but I've heard that a lot. And that is the case that under conditions of a crisis where people are searching around for an alternative, they may well go in the direction of a fundamentalist, the anti-immigrant approach, and so on, or they're open for a different alternative. And
Okay,
that's
just
where,
want to ask one question from you here. So when you say the pressure tactics from Japan, from Germany, and from other regional countries, there is another country, Palestine. I think the Palestine question is very close to the Chinese people also. President Xi Jinping have given a very hard and he gave very good proposal to solve the problem. That the Chinese stance is consistent, that is opposing the Israel and the genocide in Palestine. So will Israel come to pressurize President Trump to take this question to the President Xi Jinping?
that I don't know. You're right to point to the pressure from the, excuse me, from the Netanyahu government, not all of Israel. As you know, some people in Israel are very much opposed to the genocide that the Zionist grouping is carrying out. That is certainly Netanyahu's view, and he does have Trump's ear on many things. Whether he will use that access to also pressure Trump on the question of China, I don't know. But it's important to state that Netanyahu and the British, I'm sorry, Netanyahu and the Zionists in Israel have always been, to use the words of Lyndon LaRouche, the founder of my magazine, EIR, they have been like a stick of dynamite in the hands of the British geopoliticians.
Mhm.
They're the dynamite, but the British are the ones who are controlling this, as they always have from the very beginning with all of these geopolitical disputes. If you look around the world, every single place where there is a geopolitical
I
dispute
asked
for
her this
good
question.
reason comes from the
I asked this
British.
question because definitely there would be talk about the Iran-US war. So when Iran-US war would be discussed, definitely the Israel also want to exploit this opportunity for themselves.
Yes, I think that's true. But on the other hand, as you said, Pakistan is now playing a major role as an interlocutor, a mediator, not a party to either side, but an interlocutor has a voice at the table just to bring a sense of reason and so on and so forth. I myself consider the possibilities in Pakistan in that regard and in many regards to be very great because you're in a position as a significant middle level power in Pakistan to play a role to tilt the balance in one direction or the other. And if it could be possible for China and India to come together around the idea of cooperation, even though there are disputes and there are going to be disputes, for India and Pakistan to cooperate on development instead of fighting. These would be very positive developments for the world. And I think Pakistan, by bringing that kind of approach of let's solve this dispute to the discussion, has a big role to play. And of course,
And
Pakistan's relationship to Saudi Arabia as well.
I think the Pakistan have this experience also. In the 1970s, it was the Pakistan who brought China and USA close. And I
Mhm.
strongly believe the rapprochement between China and the USA strengthen the globalization and open a new world of opportunities. I think Pakistan can again play a role here. And Pakistan is ready for the cooperation just with India, with any country. But the problem with that, Mr. Modi government, I'm not saying with the Indians, they are too close to the Israel, the Zionist lobby. They are following their, you can say, their policies. That is creating a problem. But we must be the optimistic. Let's hope. So,
Optimistic and look to the areas of that are to solve problems rather than the areas that are problems. And I think that possibility is there. Another example besides what you just mentioned of Pakistan's role was the whole initiative taken by Prime Minister Primakov of Russia, which was the idea of a strategic triangle and to build an alliance among Russia, China, and India, because whatever their differences, they have more in common working together than they have differences. That holds for the BRICS as well. It holds for the SCO as well. I'm sure, Pakistan is in SCO. You could find with every one of the other members plenty of points of difference. But the point is the points of convergence. And I think Pakistan's role now around this crucial issue for all of humanity of war in Iran puts Pakistan in the limelight and an important position where it can bring that type of approach to bear on the world stage. And I'm very optimistic about those possibilities.
I think in the with the we can also discuss the example of the Pakistan and Russia. They are mending their relationship, although they have very bitter history. But the both countries are working together. I was just talking to the high level some diplomatic expert from Russia. They were talking about they made a mistake about Pakistan. The mistake they were looking the Pakistan through the lens of India, and that should be
Mhm.
not the case. Anyway, but there are many things to discuss. But still, again, we must be the hopeful. The meeting between President Xi Jinping and the President Trump will bring the positive outcome, a win-win cooperation, which will not only be the beneficial for the both countries, but also for the world. and special and
Absolutely, absolutely, because what you said a moment ago that this relationship is crucial for global stability, that is the central point, and hopefully that will be the outcome.
and Mr. Trump and the war lobby must understand China is not a weak country, even on the military front. The first, you can say, the first sign of China's strength you can see from the J-10C, which Pakistan used against the Rafale. So that is the only one glimpse. So China has become very strong militarily also. So the no
Mhm.
country can threat them. But and China also don't want to threat anyone. They're looking for the cooperation. At present, Xi Jinping always say cooperation is better than the confrontation. Dialogue is better than the confrontation. So let's hope that things goes well. We will come with another episode after the meeting, and we will discuss what we have discussed, either it was good or not, and what has happened. Thank you for watching our video, and we will wait for your comments and refine our the second meeting according to your comments. Thank you. Allah Hafiz. Bye bye.